All right, welcome to episode 2 of Beyond Baseball. I'm here again, as always, with Dr. Caleb Mezzy. We have a great interview for all of you today. But first, Caleb, how are you doing?
I'm great. I'm really excited about our guest.
Yeah, it was an awesome interview. And usually we were going to have some topics that we were going to talk about prior to interviews, but this was a long one full of a lot of important information. So we just kind of want to give you some highlights about what we thought about the interview. I was just really impressed about his positive attitude every single time that he had a moment of adversity or a moment of transition. He was always able to keep his mind in a positive place and also wasn't afraid to reach out to help people. And so those were some of the things that stood out to me. But Caleb, what are some of the things that you really enjoyed about that interview?
Yeah, very similar. You'll hear some of the themes that we talk about throughout the podcast, but I think perspective comes to mind when we talk about Hilton and really just him looking back on his crazy career. I jokingly said that it was very symbolic to many documentaries and Disney movies we've seen. You guys will hear that. I won't spoil those. But I think for him, it was just so cool to see that he never, lacked a curiosity or a thirst for learning in every step that he took. He said, there's something to be taught here, something that I can experience. And he had the self-confidence to go forward with all of that, where a lot of these trials and tribulations that he went through could have, hurt his self-confidence or made him question his own self-esteem and his talents. He did not do that. And we'll see that in different parts of his life as, he finished his degree. He explored hobbies such as, building tables and, exploring wood and what that really could do for his home life. So I think just learning about him as a person and then seeing, like you said, the positivity that he continues to do as a scout now with players that he's, finding for the Philadelphia Phillies.
Yeah, and I think you think about as human beings when we try to go through change, it's hard, and all the amount of change that he had to go through in his entire life, and he just kept going the course and trying to find what he loved, and I think that will stick out to a lot of people. But we don't want to hold anybody up too much. We'll get turned over to that interview right now, and hope you all enjoy. Here again for another great interview of Beyond Baseball. We are lucky enough to have Hilton Richardson, former prospect with the Kansas City Royals, Atlanta Braves, Boise State football player, and now area scout with the Philadelphia Phillies. Hilton, how are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. Yeah, doing well. I'm down here in actually my second area as a scout. I'm down here in the Four Corners, and it's starting to heat up for sure. We just had a big, huge storm last night, but we're doing good.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. We're glad to have you. One of the things that we're trying to do on Beyond Baseball is just share the stories and the journeys of former players, current players, making their way through professional baseball. So tell us a little bit about your story, kind of how you went through professional baseball and made that transition to a life after the game.
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. I mean, we're going to have a lot of stuff to talk about, which would be good. But yeah, originally from the Seattle area, grew up in Kirkland, Washington. Back in 2007, was drafted by the Royals, 7th round. Scott Ramsey signed me. I spent 4 years with them in the minor league system. 2007 was in Surprise. 2008, I was in the Abbey League in Burlington. 2009, up in Idaho Falls. Got called up that year to Burlington, the Midwest League. 2010, started the Midwest League, right? And I went through that season. Went through spring training in 11 with the Royals, ended up getting released. Funny story at the end of it, making that transition into the Braves. I got released that last week of spring training. I was with my dad, Ronald Richardson, and him and I went out to dinner that night just to kind of refocus, right? My parents were there that last week, and I'm sitting there at dinner, and then my phone rings, and I look at it, and it's just a Georgia phone number. And I kind of put it down. My dad's like, no, answer it. Like, this will be, you never know. You never know who's calling. My dad's got a sports background, too. He's like, you never know who's calling, especially now. Pick up the phone, not necessarily in a great attitude. I'm like, hello? And he goes, hi, this is Ronald Richardson with the Atlanta Braves. How are you doing? Is this Hilton Richardson? I said, okay. And I'm like I'm looking across the table at my dad, but I just heard somebody say they're Ronald Richardson, and I was like, what? He's like, this is Ronald Richardson with the Braves. This is, so-and-so. And I was like, I totally apologize. I'm looking at my dad. My dad's name is the same as yours. He goes, totally get it. And then him and I had a brief conversation, and he said, hey, we obviously saw you got released through the wire. We're looking to potentially, bring you to camp. What do you got? I said, my bags are packed. I'm ready to go. He's like, you could go home, and make, just get settled in and allow this to kind of sink in a little bit and kind of get refocused. And I said, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. Ended up flying down to Florida the next day and go through Orlando into extended spring training with them, do well, get assigned to Rome, to the Rome Braves in the Sally League. Start off going 8 for 8. I mean, my first 2 games, I was 4 for 4, and I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I'm finally, hitting my stride. Again, and then the season transitioned to an up and down year, a couple injuries throughout the way. I remember sliding into second base head first, just like Doug Sisson had always told me not to, but I was always ultra aggressive. And the throw was to the right of the bag. Shortstop comes across, his knee hits me in the head. I'm out for 2 weeks. I come back, I'm doing good, I'm doing bad. Tear my hamstring making a play in center field. Out 2 more weeks, come back, I'm doing good, doing bad, and I start making that transition again of where I feel like I'm getting locked in. We're in Kannapolis. I went through a practice where they said, hey, you're healthy, you're ready to go, and I'm thinking, okay, perfect. Get on the bus, we head down to Greenville about 2:30 in the morning, and the new manager, because Matt Walbeck had been let go actually in the middle of the season, so we had a brand new manager who had never seen me play. And we get off the bus, it's 2:30 in the morning, and he says, hey, put your stuff in your room and then come down and let's talk. I'm like, perfect. Like, I'm going to get back into the leadoff spot. I'm going to get back into playing. We'll start half the game, whatever have you. And he goes, I hate to tell you this, but we got to release you. And it was like, what? Like, I'm good to go. Like, where are we at with this? He says, I haven't even seen you play, and I couldn't say anything. And I was like, totally get it. And by the way, you're flying out at 7 o'clock in the morning. So it was like this brutal, transition into again, what do I do now? This is kind of where I didn't go to bed. I stayed up all night in my hotel room. I got to the airport really early. I ended up flying back to Rome into Georgia, and I'm sitting in my apartment, and I remember calling Scott Ramsey, the gentleman who had signed me. Him and I had maintained a relationship, since my freshman year of high school. So this is, years in the making. And I said, hey, I got released again. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do. Steve Pierce was my agent. And he said, hey, it's late in the season. We're just going to probably hang out. And I said, I'm totally good with that. I really need to kind of focus and make some adjustments. And Scott goes, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm just packing up my stuff. And he's like, okay, cool. Call me back. Bye. Click. I was like, man, nobody wants to talk to me right now. I'm feeling all sorts of emotions. I call him back in an hour, and he says, hey, I got you a workout. I'm like, okay. This is amazing. It's kind of crazy, the timing of it, heading into the later part of the season. And I said, where's it at? He's like, it's at Boise State. I was like, okay. Boise State doesn't have a baseball team, right? And he goes, you don't think I know that? I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's at Boise State. And he's like, for football. And I was like, what? He's like, it's for football. And, side note, I've never played football in my life, period. Like, my parents wouldn't even let me go out and play that, winter turkey bowl game, nothing. Didn't want me to get
How old are you at this time?
So I was 23.
Okay.
I was 23. Turning 20, I was 22, turning 23 in January. January 10th is my birthday. And I remember talking to him. I said, well, how did this even come about? And Scott Ramsey had coached the special teams coach, Jeff Choate, when he was a kid. And Jeff went on to become, an absolute football guru and is working with Coach Peterson at Boise State. And he goes, yeah, we're just going to go and sit down and have a discussion. And I was like, okay. So I flew back to Seattle, drove over to Spokane. Then we drove down to Boise. I'm sitting there in the room with Coach Peterson, Coach Choate, all the athletic department. And we're sitting at this big table, and I'm introducing myself to everybody. I'm like, this is amazing because I've watched you guys, Statue of Liberty play. I'm like, this is wild because I just don't have any experience here. I said, oh, it's totally fine. We're just going to throw you out there and make sure that it's safe and you know what's going on. I'm like, safe? That's a whole different word when we're talking about going out and playing in sports. And long story short, I ended up making the team as a wide receiver. Walked on, made the team as a wide receiver in 2011. And we would sit down every morning with Coach Prince. We would go to breakfast and he'd take the salt and pepper shakers and move them around. This is the formation. This is how this goes. Because, I literally didn't have any idea. They got me football for dummies. all sorts of stuff. So I don't know how much time we have, but I went from a 6'3", 195-pound receiver to 220. I never lifted before. I never.
Wow.
I didn't have to. Ryan Stillberg. I was just a natural athlete, and I got up to 225, and they moved me to free safety. I got up to 245, they moved me to outside linebacker, and I got up to 265 and played defensive end for those 3 years. I ended up tearing my patella tendon in half, and that was kind of it. That was kind of it for football. And again, it was just this transition. I had surgery, and I'm sitting there. I'm almost to one night. I have a semester left in my degree. Mark Paul, who was our head trainer, he says, "Look, this is going to take you like a year to even get back to walking normal." I said, "I totally get it. I can see the writing on the wall." I was a 23-year-old redshirt, is kind of how that fits into the progression of life. I said, "I totally get it. This is, again, just trying to figure out what I need to do." When this was probably, a month into the recovery of it, there was a high school. Timberline High School was about a block away from where I lived in Idaho. And I remember walking over to the school, and I walked right onto the baseball field, and Coach Price, who was there at the time, was just mowing the yard. And I kind of flagged him down. I'm in my Boise State gear. I got a brace from my hip down to my ankle. And hi, what do you got? I said, "Hey," introduced myself, told him a little bit of my story. I said, "Hey, I'd love to just be here to help out. This is what I'm doing in life. I can go back to baseball really easy. And I'd love to help. I'm kind of stuck right now, but I would love to help." And he goes, "Okay, come back tomorrow and we'll talk." So I'm going to his office, and he's like, "What do you think about being my head JV baseball coach?" And I was like, "Okay." I was like, "I can get down with that. I can try to figure that out." Got away to the state championship game, which was awesome. We ended up losing, but those kids, man, they tested me for sure. They're, just talking a bunch of trash in the spirit. You never played. I'm like, fine, forget this. I've been doing my rehab for long enough where I feel like I can swing the bat a little bit. So they're throwing me batting practice, and I'm just crushing baseballs. I was like, I know I'm using a metal bat, but I was like, I've never hit a ball out to left field like that in my life.
You're stronger now.
Yeah.
I settled down to about 230, and I'm like, I was like, gosh, the most explosive and athletic I've ever felt was at 235 after I put on this whole new kind of transition of weight and strength, functional strength from football. And I said, okay, I kind of want to figure this out. Coach Price gave me a key to the batting cage, and so after I'd be done with school, studying, going to work, because again I had to find jobs to do, I would actually go and hit in the cage from either 11:30 at night until about 1 o'clock in the morning. And I would go back and just rest, and he had this big old pitching machine that could throw any kind of pitch, and I'd put 200 baseballs in there and just turn it on and just see what happens. And that kind of got me the itch to say, hey, I want to try this again. So got back into better shape, and then I actually made a phone call. My roommate's dad knew a guy who was a scout for the Phillies, who happened to be Shane Bowers, who's down in Southern California. And he says, yeah, if this guy wants to come down and, I obviously am not going up to Boise, but if this cat wants to come down and work out, sure, I'll make time for him. And so I saved up some money, bought my plane ticket, got down there, rental car, everything. Said, hey, I'm here. Let's do this. Had a tremendous workout. And he's like, I don't really know what we got, but we got something, And so he's like, I hate to ask you this, but can you stay a couple more days until my boss comes into town? And I was like, sure, whatever it takes. At this point, you got to just dive all in and insert Daryl Connor, right, who was our West Coast cross checker at the time. And he said, hey, it did another workout. Did the same thing, and he didn't really say much about it, but you fast forward, for the sake of time, you fast forward a couple more weeks, and then I get a phone call from Joe Jordan, who's our director of player development. He says, hey, we'd love to invite you to spring training. And so I packed up all my stuff from Boise, went down to Clearwater. Tremendous time with the organization. Right from day one, it was pretty incredible. It was the shortest amount of time I ever spent with any organization, but it was really the most special, I think. Went through spring training, was doing great. They had Larry Green in left, you had Carlos Ducci in center, and you had Dylan Cousins in right. They brought me in and said, hey, you're playing better than everybody. And I said, this is totally get it. Understand, I'm 25 at the time. I said, I get it, but I'm just in a good spot. I know what to do. Situational baseball is doing good. Defensively, I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit from left, center, right, that kind of stuff. I'm like, I'm just doing my part. I know where I need to be and what I need to be doing. They said, but we got to release you. There's no room. And that's like, there was how many millions of dollars there, and you gave me a plane ticket. Totally get it. Stood up, shook their hand, said, thank you. This has been an amazing opportunity. Go back to Boise. that summer, I ended up graduating with my degree in criminal justice, which was awesome because there was, that aspect of it too, with guys leaving baseball and leaving that money for school on the table. Again, I would like to think that I was one of the few to do it, but I was pushed to do it too at a certain aspect, and it was really good. So I'm really grateful for that. But as soon as, in God's timing, as soon as I'm done graduating, I get this phone call. I'm working in a fencing yard in Boise, and this guy calls me. It's a Philadelphia phone number, and I'm like, that same conversation. I'm like, who could this be? It's like, hey, this is Shane Bowers. How's it going? I said, fine. I'm just sweating a little bit. I'm moving a bunch of pipes and fencing in this yard in Boise in the summertime, And he's like, okay, well, you ever think about being a scout? And I was like, no. He goes, well, he's like kind of caught him off guard. And I said, well, tell me more about it, And so, long story short, again, I go back to Seattle, interview for the job, get the job. And then spent 4 years in the Northwest, 15, 16, 17, and 18, scouting the Northwest. Was able to have some success up there, which was fun. Oddly enough, again, that transition out of baseball, get a phone call because Boise State baseball is coming back. I get a phone call and says, hey, what do you think about being the hitting coach? So got the phone call, said yes, left scouting, moved back to Boise. Again, kind of full circle stuff. Ended up being the hitting coach there for that 19-20 season where it fell apart. I'm out of baseball again. I'm working at Simplot, which was, again, an industry that I didn't really have any experience with, but had great connections and support to help get me there. And I get a phone call from Brad Holland, who was the Four Corners guy, and I was back in the Northwest. He said, hey, you want to get back into scouting, yes or no? And I was like, yes. And he goes, click. Well, I don't know what that meant, right? And he ends up calling me back later that night. He says, I had to know right then and there. I was on the phone with our scouting director. I put him on hold to call you one last time because I'm at work. I'm at my office job, and I had 3 missed phone calls from Shane, from Brad, from Daryl. And this was like the deadline, right? And he's like, I had to know right then and there, and we'll be in touch. So long story short, again, I do the interview, come down here, and move down to Phoenix, and I've been down here scouting the last 2 years.
And that's an awesome story, and you have it full of different transitions, throughout the steps of your post career. And I think the one thing that's impressive too is that you were never afraid to go out and ask for help or reach out to people during those transitions. And I think the one thing that you mentioned too that stuck out to me was that you always were trying to figure out, what do I do next? And
Yep.
So when that question came up to you, who are some of the people that you could always reach out to, or you knew you could go to kind of help you? Because a lot of times it just takes talking to someone during those times of transition and trying to figure out things and hash things out. Were there a couple of people that you would just always go to?
Yeah, definitely my dad was the first one. Scott Ramsey's another one. Family friends, Dirk Anderson is another one. Ivor Hodgson, and then even Danny Duffy, right? That core group of guys, my dad, right? He's not going to steer me wrong. But I also think going to him first because he's so dang patient. He's able to look things in the face, break them down, not be reactionary to anything. Like, what happened? Why did it happen? What are some options moving forward? Right? Scott Ramsey, more the bold aspect. Go for it. Dirk Anderson, again, a patient approach, but very, very methodical in how he thinks and how to really kind of position yourself. It's the past that leads to the past that leads to the basket, right? That kind of stuff. He's more of that training. Well, you should do this because then at this point in time, then you can look to here, which might lead you back to this, that kind of stuff. Danny and Ivor have always had my back since day one. We were all in that same 2007 draft class, and that was something where, again, they were just so real and honest to who I was personally at my core. Again, that's kind of one of the things with the players that you play with. You spend more time with them than you do with your family. That was another adjustment to make. So when I would hear stuff from them, it's like, in certain aspects of life, you're like, these guys know me better than I know myself right now because I'm not necessarily seeing the whole picture. I'm focused on, man, maybe my feelings are hurt. Leaving the Royals at that point in time, it was like, I just spent the last 4.5 years with these people almost every single day. 95% of my life has been here with these guys, and now it's gone. And now what, right? And so you have to pick and choose, I think, where those transitions are in your life and who you talk to and the advice you get. But I like to say that it comes from a different blend of people and even their own experiences, that kind of stuff.
I have two questions just to jump in. I mean,
Yeah.
the number one word that comes out in listening to your story is resilience,
Yeah.
right? And I
Yeah.
think the crazy thing is, and this is my second word, is perspective. I
Sure.
think now where you are, what you've done, and looking at your backdrop, like your background, we can see
Yeah.
the success, right? But it
Yeah.
also gives you this perspective that all this trials and tribulations that you went through, the bumps and bruises, the breaks, whatever we want to call them, got you here, made you a better
My gosh.
scout, made you a better professional. And at that time, you're not thinking that. Like that's not a thing. And you're beating yourself up. So it's interesting, Jared's question of like, who kept you grounded in terms of that, and having that board for you to like either soundboard or motivational board, whatever it may be. But what like interests did you have? What hobbies did you have? What things did you go to during these negative times or during these downward spirals? Because you need to have something. And the funny thing is, when I hear the football story, I hear you talk about baseball, going back to that field, seeing that even if you have your Boise State stuff on, you're still going back to baseball. But when you were in baseball, where did you go to?
Interesting. Yeah, because if you would have told me, I mean, even a year before, this is what's going to happen next, I mean, half the time I'd be like, no, I don't believe you. Again, even whether it was with baseball stuff and opportunities, having never played football before, and I'm going to go walk onto the number 4 ranked team in the country. Even getting back into baseball, post having not played in 3 years, which doesn't happen. Looking at it from this perspective, from this side of it as a scout, you have to find ways to stay focused. You have to have outlets for your mind or your body, your spirit, right? Mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it is, you have to have those outlets. And like you were saying, it was hard you can't ever really see where you're going or where you've been until you look in the rearview mirror. Dan Ramsey told me that. He's also a scout in Northwest, and that's Scott's oldest boy. Dan's dialed in, with the Lord, and that was a pursuit of mine and still is. But he was one that I would go to and say, "Hey, this is where I'm struggling. Like, how do I focus? How do you help me get back on track?" And you kind of do it without even noticing that you're doing it. It's kind of, I guess, how I would unfortunately explain that. But I think trusting people, being able to be vulnerable with what you've gone through, what you've done, and then who you are as a person, and explaining it to you, to Jared, or to you, Caleb, that this is what I'm struggling with, this is what I need help with. My outlets when I was playing with the Royals, I didn't really have anything. I didn't feel the need to have them, and that might have been a maturity thing as a high school draft pick. I couldn't see that. I see big leagues. I see this is where I'm going. This is what I need to do. That's it. And then all of a sudden, that first punch in the mouth happens when you get released from spring training. It's like, oh shoot, not necessarily the feeling of, oh my gosh, I don't know who I am, but there is a feeling that I felt of, what do I do now, right? And I remember getting up that very next morning. I got up at 6:30 in the morning. Go make breakfast. I get dressed. I'm getting ready to head out the door. My dad gets up. He's like, "What are you doing?" So I'm just getting ready to go to the. I was like, "Wow." I was like, it's not a thing anymore. That doesn't happen. But I was so in just this autopilot, right? Like I needed to be able to find something else to do. I was grateful to have the opportunity with the Braves, right? Football happened. Started journaling when I got to football, and
it's huge.
That was and something I was like, man, am I really going to start? Like, yes, and it just alleviated things. It just took up time, right? It just took
because the thoughts are in your head.
They're
so
there.
You tell the people, or you write them down.
Yeah, and it's almost like you got to uncork it somehow, because otherwise they're still going around.
Yeah.
You have to find a way to outlet, right? The definition of an outlet. I need to get it out and get it on paper, and then I can just deal with it and process it in a specific way. You transition into after football, after baseball the second time. I'm up in, back into Boise with coaching. Really went through the hardest part of my life, where not necessarily centered around COVID stuff, but ended up losing 13 people in a year.
Wow.
And I mean, teammates from all different parts, from high school, from Boise State football to Phillies, family, friends, cousins, coaches, mentors. And I'm dating my wife at the time. And I remember I mean, it was almost like every other week I was losing somebody. And so I just couldn't, I knew that I couldn't do it without having an outlet. I knew I couldn't do it without talking to her about it. I knew I couldn't do it without having some sort of way to channel that energy into. I don't have baseball, I don't have football. I'm stuck.
Yeah.
It's not the right word. I'm in an office setting, right? How do I get any of this physical stuff out, right? And so by happenstance, I mean, she's definitely the biggest interior decorator I've ever been around, and she found this wooden table that she liked, but it was in this raw slab type of thing. It was just this raw piece of wood that she found, and she's like, "Oh, we're gonna just get this, and we can." I've seen people transition. I'm like, "Okay, well, what do I do? How do I do this?" And so I end up talking to a guy, and he says, "Yeah, you can just do this, this, and this. You can use epoxy on it. You can do this." I'm like, "What's that?" And then you transition and you move forward in life with this process. And I would spend hours and hours and hours just working on crafts with woodworking and chisels and building doors. This is one of the doors that I made, these barn doors, and then these tables. I've got a 12-foot dinner table that I made from just a raw slab that is now with me, probably with me for the rest of my life. You just had to find transitions into just diving into things, into projects. I think making sure that they're structured, that they're in a professional type of setting, that they're not necessarily reckless, but there is a focus to it, right? You have to be able to play as hard as what you're doing. But I mean, I found the beauty in taking something raw and rough and rigid and then transitioning it into something where all of a sudden I'd spend 6 hours sanding a table and they're like, "What are you doing?" So I am falling in love with this, but I haven't thought about anything else.
Yeah.
And not that I'm not going to address those issues, but in that moment, in order for me to be the best version of myself, I was like, I got to dive into this. And
So
it's been pretty it's been crazy because then I've been able to send stuff kind of all over the country, which is never what I would have thought it would have ever transitioned into, because that's not why I was doing it.
But there's this part of you that is, you're at this road in many times of your life where it's, I could go down distracted avenue or I can go down discipline lane.
Yes,
and the discipline lane is usually what you go back to, but the things that you've picked up have never distracted you from baseball. Usually someone goes to football, you don't see them coming back. I mean, your story is Vince Papale.
Yeah.
It's Kurt Warner and it's Jim Morrison, the rookie, like sprinkled into this one. Together. Yeah, into this one person. But it's just so crazy because some of those things that come up distract people from, the main, I don't want to say the main goal, because that maybe wasn't your main goal, but the main focus originally. Yep. And football didn't do that. Tables didn't do that. Your wife or anybody else didn't do that. I mean, you continued down discipline. That story with your dad, I'm going to the foot, and you didn't finish the sentence. That's discipline. That's discipline that you've ingrained into yourself, and it's just translated over so well.
It was a wild, wild time, and I'm grateful the way that I was raised, right, in that regard, to just kind of be true to yourself, continue to work hard. My parents never forced me into anything, but if you start this, you will finish it. There was certain aspects of my life that I feel like I was able to hold on to. I mean, I had great opportunities, but I also worked pretty hard to get there. I guess just that core group of people that were always there, that you check in with, that you stay focused with, that will be, more importantly, I think, inadvertently completely honest with you, and what you're doing and where you're at. And those people they're not giving me any BS about what I'm doing or where I'm at. Even when I would start to very, well, let's just stay out later. No, like, you got to, even my two best high school friends, no, like, we're hanging out here and then we're going because, whatever. You've got to have that core group of people that all of a sudden keep you focused. And I think I always recognized that I was in a unique position. My dad refereed college basketball for 30 years. I remember hearing him tell stories about guys and just kind of being on the scene at a younger age and realizing that this is perspective, right? As I'm sitting there, watching him run up and down the court, or even going to a game myself, basketball, baseball, doesn't matter. Just recognizing that you're on a platform, right? And it's a very special platform wherever it is, and you got to make the most of it, because if you don't, then it's gone. And I remember seeing that, I think, through the basketball aspect as a little kid, that you got a chance to really do something special here. in a very short window. And I think, by the grace of God, I had the beautiful people around me. I had the right mentality, but also had the drive to execute that stuff too. That it's like timeout. Like, I've never played football in my life, but I'm going to go play with the winningest class in college football history. So I better make sure that I'm kind of dialed in on what I'm doing, or even getting a chance to, again, go work out with the Phillies for an opportunity. It's like, dude, you got one. I reference it a lot, that Eminem, you got one shot, man. I listened to that song in the freshman high school basketball tryouts. I think that's the only reason why I made the team.
So I have a question, because we want to talk, I guess, more about the beyond baseball piece.
Sure.
And one of the things I'm thinking about and hearing your story is this question that I love, and I think Jared will probably be exhausted by this question, but I'm going to ask this every podcast. Is
Sure.
I want you to answer, why did you like baseball originally? Like, what drew you to baseball?
The
I'm
thing
going to
that
ask follow-up questions.
Yeah, right. The opportunity, because I grew up loving basketball. I was with my dad, all this stuff. I knew that I loved baseball. It was the crack of the bat. My very first game that I ever played in, I was playing catch with Alex Thorson, and I'm probably in second or third grade, and we're warming up, and crazy story, long story, right? He throws the ball, I lose it in the shade of a willow tree. It hits me right in the eye. I mean, just dropped like a bad habit. I'm crying for the first time in front of all these people. I'm upset, I'm hurt. I can't see. Like, there's all this stuff going on. They're like, "Oh, you're fine." I'm like, "God, this is stupid. Like, what am I doing here? Right? This isn't like, it's not basketball." I got my first hit that day, and I remember just hitting the ball and being able to run, and go all the way. Got a triple, and I'm standing there. I'm like, "Oh, it wasn't that bad." I mean, just fell in love with the game that first day. It was the crack of the bat. It was the anticipation of the game. It was something that I could relate to, where kind of on a selfish level, I knew that I could help the team win because I was athletic, or I was fast. I remember being able to steal a base at any point in time. It didn't matter. You are not, maybe a cocky way as a younger kid, you're not better than me, and I'm going to show you why. And I think baseball gave me that individual aspect of the sport to showcase what I could do. Whereas basketball, right, more team, that kind of stuff, it was very limited on when and where I could do and use what I was good at. And I love being a part of the team, right, and being able to help win. And it was fun. It was just really fun. I remember playing in a tournament up in Squim, where the Vampires are at, up in the Northwest growing up. And I remember watching Craig Strum when I was 12 years old. And I was playing center field. He was playing left field. Ball gets hit in the left center gap. He's running, and we're running. I'm like, in my mind, I'm not going to get to it. If I look over at him and he runs and he just lays out, full layout, catches the ball, and I was like, "What?" I remember I was like, "You can do that?" He was like, "Yeah, what are you like? What?" And I was like, "Right, 2 outs." And I remember just falling like, you can do certain things and showcase what you can do. And I was like, this game is amazing. There's no clock. There's no, and I felt like there was no limit to what I could do.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I kind of want to just build on that a little bit on what Caleb talked about and loving baseball and the passion and the fun. The one thing I find interesting too is that you mentioned transitioning from high school to professional baseball. So you're going from that having fun all the time, going out and competing and enjoying the game, to having to transition to professional baseball, not only having a different outlook on what baseball kind of means and is, but also having to figure out how to be an adult at the same time. And I wanted to just know if you could dive into a little bit of that and how that transition worked, and what resources you think you could have utilized or could have wanted to have during that transition.
So, crazy question, right? Because I ended up taking my finals the week before the draft because I wanted to be able to focus and just, again, it was different back then. I think 07 might have been the first year they did it on TV, but other than that, it was just really 50 rounds, watch the computer see if your name gets picked. And making that, I ended up getting drafted 7th round. Graduate a couple days later. We're going through that senior party. We're at our family fun center. I get back home at 3 o'clock in the morning. I spend that next day sleeping and packing my bags, and then the following morning I'm on a plane down to Phoenix. And I remember staring out the window like, what am I doing? Like, what? It's been such a blur.
Yeah.
The last week, it's been crazy. Will Simon picked me up from the airport, Sky Harbor. Peter Mitchell, Hodge Nielsen was in that band also. We went and picked up the Canadian. And we're just driving to the hotel and getting situated. And I just remember sitting there like, what am I doing? And open my hotel door. Sean McCauley is my roommate. All these high school people, we're all just kind of here from all over the place. So having that, I wasn't prepared. Didn't struggle with it, but wasn't prepared for that immersion into different cultures. With the Latin kids, wasn't prepared for the interaction with people from other demographics or backgrounds. I would like to think I'm a nice people person, so it didn't bother me. But I saw people have confrontation. You're like, whoa, like this cat is from here and this guy's from here, and you're like, you can totally see why they're not oil and water not going to mix. So making that transition, I was like, I have to really find ways to be open and spend time with the Latin guys and learn how to talk. And where did this kid come from? It was such a blur, because then all of a sudden the next day you're dealing with Lloyd Simmons in your face telling you that you guys better be straight and narrow because he's Z for a reason, man. Zero tolerance for anything. But he was the perfect guy to help us young kids make that transition. The Royals did a phenomenal job in keeping him in that role to say, there's no room for you guys to be messing up. Like, you're here for a reason. This is exactly why. And you're focused, right? You're focused, and he was able to touch on certain things that resonated with me in my heart and who I was as a person. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, I got to really do my best to stay focused here. So having him be in that role was phenomenal. Ivor Hodgson, again, was a college kid who we gravitated to, but he was also had gone through kind of his own story. He had already experienced. He wasn't a high school kid anymore, right? He's been out on his own, and he's been able to help us stay in line, that kind of stuff. Like, those people in place allowed you to really learn more aspects of life and apply it to baseball. And even the lessons you learned in baseball, you're like, man, I have to apply that to my life, because the focus, the dedication, the determination, the competition now from not only the people in the draft and where you came from, but within this team and how they're playing and where they're from, and college kids and Latin kids and American kids and high school kids. Like, dude, this is a grind, and you're right in the middle of it right now, and it kind of knocks on your door a lot faster than you think. And so having that happen, it was like, whoa, like a little bit of a culture shock, right? I would have really, some of the advice I could talk to the kids in transitioning now from high school, and I've had to do this sometimes as a scout, like, this is not Hilton as a scout. This is going to be Hilton as a former high school kid. Like, I don't think you're ready, and here is why. Because this is what you're going to experience, right? All of a sudden, you take a kid who might be of a sheltered culture where everybody's been involved and kind of coddling this kid. It's like, no, I'm about to give this kid $500,000 and set him free in the world that he's never even been outside of the state. Like, I'm not comfortable with that. And this isn't even me as a scout. This is me as a person and somebody who's been in that situation where you've seen it too, man, Jared, where these kids come in and you got all this money, and it's like, poof, it just like
hits you fast.
Yeah, it really does. And so the maturity level, I would have liked to have somebody come in and check with me a little bit more. Scott did a tremendous job with my makeup, and I think that's what he trusted his gut. Because he knew kind of the core values, and we're taking a high school kid in the top 10 rounds, like, you better have it figured out, right? Which I feel like pat myself on the back and my parents that this was good. But there are certain cases where, looking back, I feel like there is not, as much as we talk about that transition between and out of baseball, I don't know if there's ever, Caleb, you might be able to talk about this too. I don't know if there's ever been, I know they're doing more and more with it now, but like that transition from high school into pro ball, because that's a big, deep rabbit hole with the actual dynamics of the draft. But like, are these high school kids? I don't think I've had a conversation in my 6 years of scouting where somebody has said they don't want to go play professional baseball. Out of a couple hundred interviews that I've had, over the course of 6 years, I want to play pro ball. I want to play pro ball. Yeah, but like, are you ready for it? That's another question that they have to answer sometimes. And I don't know if there's ever been a preparation for a lot of kids saying, this is what you're going to go. Have you even, you're taking German right now in high school because you thought you were going to go travel the world, and you have the ability to go play baseball, and that's not even going to happen. Like, you're not even going to be able to communicate with these guys, and that's a lot to ask, a lot to mix in there. So maybe the maturity level and just having guys be acclimated to that culture shock of getting thrown in this melting pot of all different demographics.
I think it goes back to what you alluded to when you said identity and not questioning who you are, but you had a good sense going in that you are a confident person if you bet on yourself, right? That's what I gather. And I think a lot of that does come from your dad, even though I don't even know your dad. But the question when I asked you what you're interested in, baseball, you eventually got to this thing of, I see it as an individualized game where I can bet on myself. That's very interesting because baseball is such a team sport. Yep. And I'm not saying that you are a me first player, but I'm saying that you see that as the opportunity to prove to yourself and then also prove to other people. I think if you ask that question and you do it in the right way, not because usually what you get is, I'm good at it, right? Like that's the answer you get. Why do you like baseball? I'm good at it. If you get that answer, or if you get, I like being part of a clubhouse or being with the guys, that's where the assimilation, as you call it, from high school to minor league baseball or just getting drafted starts to falter because you're not going to be as good. You're not going to have the same guys. There's going to be different guys, right? The team might not be good. Like the whole thing might just start unraveling down.
Bless Jared's heart and all the other clubhouse guys for some of the teams that they've had to put up with. I mean, I think my second year in the Abbey League, Tony Tiarina was my manager. I think we started out the year like 1-17. I mean, it was rough. I've got a scrapbook from our Burlington, Iowa team, 2010, and some of the headlines in there are just unbelievable to look at. Just how, I mean, obviously you learn the development of the game, and it shows Bees falter again, Bees blow the lead. I mean, it's just the whole season. So bless their heart for dealing with that. Not in a selfish way, but I think that I was also able to experience failure early on, that I knew that I had to focus on what I can do
and how you respond.
Stay within myself, right? Really understand what I can do, how I do it, and then truly leave it up to somebody else. Like if I'm batting leadoff, like I got to get on base, and I don't care what it is, and then I have to steal second base, and I can, so I will, and then I'm just going to let it play out from there. And I think that I was lucky enough to have the failure, lucky enough to understand that I'm good at it, but I'm not great at it. I got to work. I have to work at it. And I think that was something that, you rewind the clock that I had instilled in me from a little kid. You got to work at it because it's not just going to just come naturally. And that comes sometimes like somebody serving you your lunch, a couple times where it's like, you weren't that good. Blake and Aaron are these 2 6'7" twins from Redmond High School that we played basketball against. And it's like, gosh dang, like this kid is 3 feet taller than me, but I got to go play basketball against him. Like, what do I do? Right? Facing some of that adversity, whether it's on the field, off the field, right? Older in life with Hilton, losing people, you have to be able to, you're going to get adversity, and whether the degree of difficulty is going to vary across the board, but you better have ways to deal with it. I think where people get in trouble at is where they get outside of who they are, what they want to do. Not in the sense of, I say in my own story, maybe not being afraid. I wasn't afraid to try anything. I mean, that's been a really, I think, a blessing. It's like, why not? I've never played football. I don't even play Madden, but I'm going to go, let's go try it. Let's go see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen because look at my life. It's just kind of.
But you're curious. When someone proposed that to you, you didn't dismiss it. You didn't close off. You said, let me learn more about this, and then I'll test. Again, go back, individual bet on yourself. And I think that's a big thing. It's like when we talk about identity in baseball, what we really say is, who are you? And the problem is that people say, I'm a baseball player, and that's not really who you are. And when you remove that, now who are you? I'm a fill in the blank. And for you, I mean, like, not that we're diagnosing you here, but like if you were going to say, who are you? You're a curious, disciplined athlete. Like, because you're even building a wood table or wood, like you have to be some kind of athletic. I can't do that.
So, well, it's funny, but because of again, my wife Aurora's like, who's going to help you move that? I'm like,
me.
I can do it. And then she's like, why are you walking funny? I was like, because my back hurts.
Yeah.
Because I just moved this 400-pound log. How am I going to do it? What do I got to do? And I'm working on it because it's my project, and I'm going to turn this into something beautiful. But then we all get to sit at the table and have an amazing meal. That kind of stuff, to where you have to say, I'm curious to figure this out, like you said, but I have to have some procedures in place to where it's like, okay, this is how I'm going to do this. I have to have a plan of attack.
That seems like how you
Yeah.
learn, because the way you learn football and all that kind of stuff. I'm curious what your infatuation is with wood, just in general. The bat, the door, the table.
Everything. I mean, all sorts of stuff that it gave me an opportunity to. I think it was because the first piece that I got looked like a piece of driftwood that was trash that I've walked by. I mean, 1,000 times on the beach, being in Seattle and on the water. And I looked at it and I turned it into something. I started seeing things in the grains. I started seeing patterns. I started feeling the softness of the wood. I started seeing more and more things come out of this that I had never seen before. And if I could do that with this, what could I do with that? If I could, this was given to me, but what if I start investing in certain things? And that was another thing too, right? Financially, like diving into it, like committing to this, not just going to half-ass it. Like, no, you're going to commit to this. So instead of using my Harbor Freight sander, right, which was phenomenal, did an amazing job, no, I'm going to go spend $200 on a DeWalt one, and then I can do it. It's like, oh my gosh, like look at the difference that it made.
Yeah.
Even with the same piece of wood, look how much I was able to elevate certain things. And I haven't found that outlet or found that reason to kind of discover more things in any other projects. Writing is what it is. I'm pushing myself now to read more. I can really read more and constantly learn. I'm sure painting kind of gives an access to a different part of your brain that allows you to do more things. And I'm stuck at stick figures right now. I haven't dove into it yet.
Yeah.
There's just certain aspects of life that when I say, hey, this is woodworking just happened to be there for me at that time.
Yeah.
I feel like that was some building. I started building things. I built a 15 by 20 foot shop in our backyard. She's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'm just building it. I'm just putting my time and effort and just again finding an outlet that was, I think, functional for where I was at. It allowed me to stay busy, physically work. I think it was so far it's been a great choice.
Yeah, and it's awesome to see all your passions and your experiences kind of develop to you to become who you are. And I guess the one last question I kind of want to end on, and this is a question I kind of want to ask every guest that we have on, is what advice would you have for current athletes thinking about ways to find themselves outside of the game? If you had like one piece of main advice that you would want to give them.
Go for it. I mean, there's certain aspects of life. I would ask them to kind of put pause and step out for a minute. And really look at the landscape of their life, and where it's been, because we all had this dream. We all have this dream of this is where we're going to go. We're going to be on the big leagues. Again, hardly ever does that stuff truly happen.
Yeah.
Right? But you need to step out of who you are. And I think, again, to Caleb, I mentioned it, who are you? What are your interests? And I'm not talking about baseball. I'm talking about stuff that you like to do in your spare time. You have to find something, and tell me I don't know is not an answer. I'm not unacceptable. Like, tell me who you are and what you like to do. And if it's reading, the second part of that question, right? Who are you and what do you like to do? I like to play video games. Okay, great. We're going to elevate that. Have you ever thought about designing a video game? And no. Okay, well, cool. Let's dive into that. Let's work on maybe the computer programming or coding and figuring out what you need to do to get a graphics engineering degree, right? And then you can start creating your own characters, and now you're building your own video game. Let's take that simple idea. I like woodworking. You're like, okay, cool. I made a cutting board. Okay, have you ever made a 15-foot dining room table? I'm like, what? That's not even in the same ballpark, right? But I want to take who you are as a person outside of baseball, and I want to elevate it. And I think that's been the beauty of having the opportunity to be a scout and help create these opportunities for a lot of kids that it's like, look, you want to be a baseball player, like I'm just a very, very tiny piece of your story and what you are, and creating an opportunity for you to go chase the dream. And ultimately why I would spend 50,000 miles driving in my car, and why I would spend hours and hours and hours, days on the road now in my life, right away from my wife and my daughter, is for that Connor Brogdon moment.
Yeah.
That I get a chance to see him pitch in the big leagues. Even if it was with one pitch, like, that was it. That was the guy's moment, and blessed that he's been able to, building a career, that he's had that opportunity to live his dream. And I happened to be a part. I remember shaking his hand. Nice to meet you, and here we go. I think finding ways for people to access who they are as a person and to elevate it and to help people is something that will always give you that opportunity. And a lot of it, I'm grateful now that I'm in this position, is that Scott Ramsey believed in me. And that's something that I always make sure I have a conversation with the kids, that kind of leading up to the draft we just had, hey, I believe in you, and this is exactly why. Like, I'm going to let it know. I'm going to manifest this as much as I can for you in your career. Whether the Phillies are in a position to draft you or not. I ran across a kid in Farmington, New Mexico, a left-handed pitcher that had just graduated high school from Ontario, Canada, that was 90 to 95. I'm like, first off, where did this cat come from? Like, here we are. Here I am in the middle of the desert in New Mexico. Connie Mack World Series, and I said, you know what? I'm not even. Sir, he said, I know. That I'm not even your area scout, but I believe in you, because what I just saw was incredible. And I don't even necessarily, you're not even necessarily my guy, but I'm making phone calls left and right now to try to figure out what we need to do to get this done.
Yeah.
You know what? Like, I believe in you. And to round out the answer to your question, letting players that are making that transition out of baseball is something they've done every single day of their life, from the time that they're in second grade. Like, if you fast forward 20 years, right? I don't care if you played in the big leagues. Yeah. If you played in the big leagues for 15 years, you're still going to make that. I'm looking at a picture of him right now because he's my favorite player, Ken Griffey Jr. I bet you 9 out of 10 times I've seen that dude on TV, over the last 5 years. He's got a camera in his hands, loves photography, loves taking pictures of his kids, in sports, being in the game. You got to, like you had said, bet on yourself, but then also believe in yourself that you can turn whatever you have your true passion for into something special.
Can I just add one thing to that? Because I think one of the things that you're alluding to in such a good way to articulate it is this idea is abstract to players who have, not even just baseball players, who have devoted their entire life to a single sport, right?
Every second, like in your mind. There's an interview, I'm interrupting you, but there was an interview with Mike Tyson, boxing, as a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid, who said he would wake up in the middle of the night in a dead sweat because he was afraid somebody was getting better than him.
Yeah.
You're like, whoa, like that's, we might put that on the far end, but still nonetheless, like, that's the amount of dedication and focus that it takes to become a 19-year-old heavyweight champion of the world, right? So your focus, like you're talking about, your every ounce of your being, literally speaking, leads up to this moment where you might be talking to a scout or playing in front of a scout or having an opportunity to get caught. I mean, all this stuff leads up to every ounce of who you are. And then all of a sudden, at the drop of a hat, when I walked into that clubhouse and my jersey's gone, it's like, what? Like, get blindsided. Definition of just, whoa.
Yeah.
But when you present other interests as you have to start here, but have you ever done this? Have you ever thought about this? It's the same thing as when you play baseball. You hit a ball, then you face 50 mile per hour, 75, and then now you're going to face 90. But that progression is so key in terms of your maturation and development that it has to be with your other interests and skills in your life outside of baseball.
There's certain parts of it that in life that you're talking about that I can't. I mean, there's a guy with our organization now that is up in the big leagues that I know never really struggled at all, and then gets up to the big leagues, has success, and all of a sudden people make that adjustment, and then everybody's like, well, this kid can't play anymore. It's like, no, like there's other aspects of who this kid is and who this person is that we need to get kind of caught up to speed here, right? You have success, you have tools, you have all the ability in the world, you've proven it, right? But where are you at mentally? Where are you at with the emotional side of it? How are you dealing it with balancing this juggling act, right? We need to get everybody on board right up here in your heart. You need to get everybody on board and we got to go. Because again, the window of opportunity is a lot different than actually what you're talking about, the maturation of somebody as a person, as a player. I mean, hardly ever, Cece, she's our mental skills coach. She said something, hardly ever does the idea of the person match up with the work it actually takes to become that person. I was like, wow, like that challenged me when I heard that. It's like, oh yeah, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to be this, I can envision doing this. Yeah, but like, have you ever done the work to even do that for a day?
Yeah.
Have you ever dove into it on such a deep level that it's an obsession to you? Have you ever taken it and elevated your thoughts to even understand what it takes? And that's why those guys are so dang good at what they do. And when you do it is, I think it's a balance across the board. It's an understanding. It's a laser focus. Right? It's an elevated state of mind. And you, back to Jared, you can apply that to stuff outside of baseball. You can. Yeah. I've been able to do it in certain aspects of my life and just taking opportunities with the perspective of saying I'm going to make the most of it, but I can take that and apply it to certain things. And it can become kind of quite beautiful of what it can turn into. And I think what I've been able to see, again, not that it's some world changer, but at the same time, it's pretty special. When you can apply who you are, let's just say in the baseball category, and you can apply that to other aspects of life. I can apply that to what I'm doing. I can apply that to reading, writing, being a doctor. I don't care if it's being a garbage man, business owner, an artist, a woodworker, a scout, a father. I mean, you can apply it to life. And getting guys to understand that there is life after baseball, right? You do not lose who you are, you just change what you do. And I think that is a big part of how I've been able to be successful, is just take the same core values and beliefs. Mr. Ellsworth, who was actually my 6th grade teacher, who I still talk to this day, he would always tell me, you're just putting on a new hat. Whether you're traveling here or doing this, doing that, you're just putting on a new hat, right? It might be with Lehigh, it might be with the Braves, it might be with whoever, Simply. It might not even be wearing that hat, but that doesn't change who you are. It's just what you do. And that also, I think, gives guys the freedom and flexibility to still say, this is exactly what I do, but now I get to do it here.
Yeah.
And you're going to get in and experience a whole new list of worldly feelings and emotions and highs and lows and things that you've never even figured out.
Yeah.
And I think is a really cool thing.
And I think that's an awesome point to just wrap up on. It's just talking about that you don't change as a person, you just change what you do. And Helen, we can't thank you enough for the time that you spent with us and just being able to sit down and talk about these real issues that will impact so many people. Your story's amazing, and just we can't thank you enough.
No, I love it. This has been fun, and again, just being an avenue, I think, of information, right? It's not going to do me any good. I got to get it out there. So I really appreciate it. I appreciate both your time. This was phenomenal.